G'day mates, it's the Doctor here. Sodor is such a vast, wondrous land of engrossing tales. Its history spreads across many railways, and within them are many engines, each with their own history. But what about the buildings? The architecture of Sodor? Today we're going to take a look at one of Sodor's very special buildings, and its surprising, complex history that'll make you appreciate your knowledge of a railway series a little bit more.
Really, Thomas? Go on, Percy. That's nice.
Well, you better keep your eyes open, you little bugger, because this is important. Where does Thomas reside? To most people, you're probably thinking of Tidmouth. It's the most common site where you'll find Thomas along with his friends resting in preparation for the next busy day. But what if I told you Thomas didn't always stay in Tidmouth? In fact, this is one of the biggest changes from the source material to TV adaptation. At the end of the second book, Thomas was awarded a new branch line all to himself, the Ffarquhar branch line. He took residence here in 1925 and has remained here ever since. Notice there is a track in the background that heads off into a small valley. Remember that line for later. Thomas, in his new neighborhood, would go on to have plenty of adventures, such as fishing, leaving a guard behind, and getting stuck in snow. He would meet plenty of new faces including Terence, Bertie, and a friendly police constable. This is when things began to change on his branch line. In 1951, a new constable took over from the one Thomas had befriended, and this new officer was less friendly. He threatened Thomas for not wearing cowcatchers and called him a danger to the public. The Fat Controller was called in to sort out the mess, which led him to recall an old steam tram from his childhood he used to ride. He purchased Toby from East Anglia to join Thomas on his branch line. Now we have two engines working over at Ffarquhar, and the shed gained a second berth. But why does it look different? That's because the original berth was constructed with orange brick, while the new one was made out of stone from the Ffarqhuar quarry. There's a lot I want to break down here. It makes the sheds authentic using material from its own location, but why was the original shed built like this in the first place? This has become one of the biggest mysteries for me in the Railway series. My understanding is according to the island of Sodor, its people, history and railways, the quarry was opened in 1924, a full year before Thomas took up residence here. Was this shed built before then? Perhaps it was meant to accommodate the coffee pot engines. It may seem minuscule in the grand scheme of things, but Wilbur Awdry was meticulous with his fantasy world, a perfectionist of sorts, when every action, every event had inspiration behind it. It seems unusual having a mismatching berth, and the shed was never rebuilt using the same stone. In 1955, Percy would join Thomas and Toby at Ffarquhar. His role was to assist at the new harbour nearby. Now Percy has been on Sodor for some time, but as the Fat Controller continued to industrialize the island, some of his engines were allocated to other places in order to handle the increasing workload. A wise business decision on his part, with a new berth constructed next to the other two in Percy's honor. They removed the interior walls, allowing the engines to have better conversations when left alone in their house. Speaking of houses, 5 years later, a clumsy cleaner accidentally started Thomas's engine by messing with his controls, leading the E2 tank engine to puff out of his sheds, stroll along the tracks, and crash into the station master's house. With Ffarquhar's main engine out of commission, the Fat Controller looked for a temporary replacement. He found a diesel rail car, much to Toby and Percy's dismay. It wasn't long ago when Sir Charles Topham Hatt II trialled another diesel on his father's railway, which attempted to terminate the entire steam fleet and bring forth a new age of locomotives to Sodor. It's perfectly understandable the engines of Ffarquhar were deeply concerned by the news. Their worries were justified, as the new diesel chose to do whatever work she wanted, leaving the other two engines no choice but to take on undesirable jobs. Not quite as bad as the diesel shunter, but still turned out to be a nasty piece of work. This added pressure would cause Percy to be careless with the trucks, which caused him to have a crash himself. Surprisingly, Toby came to her defense and puts in a good word about Daisy to the Fat Controller. In context of the story, it's not because Daisy learned to shoo a cow off a line as the previous story implies. Toby simply states she worked hard after Percy's accident yesterday. Wait a minute, yesterday? How long was he perched on that wagon? That has got to be the most uncomfortable mattress ever imaginable. Soon after, Thomas was fully mended and returned to Ffarquhar. But now, the small town, and Sodor as a whole, had acquired its first diesel engine. As a reward, a carriage shed was built alongside the Ffarquhar sheds, so Daisy had somewhere to stay. You may have noticed this new shed is fitted with 2 berths. In book 26, we see this is meant to be for Annie and Clarabelle. Which is odd considering how Daisy called them rubbish, and was so hurt by her rude remarks Percy had to take them elsewhere. Funny how they sleep next to each other now. I guess they became friends in an untold story? Just another oddity. 9 years later, the Ffarquhar sheds would be greeted with its final member, Mavis, who joined the other engines in 1964. The illustrations are kinda botched in Wilbert's final book, as they inconsistently show the carriage sheds disappearing and reappearing from panel to panel. As a result, it's unclear if Mavis's shed is meant to be part of the same buildings or isolated from them. After Mavis saved Toby from falling off a bridge, she was no longer the arrogant diesel when she first arrived, and became a welcomed addition to the town of Ffarquhar. Not much happens following this chapter. Wilbert the Saddle Tank Engine would temporarily join the railway as a helping visitor, but that's just it. He was a visitor. You may have noticed the town has sprouted in the background, showcasing how Ffarquhar has grown over time. But we don't get a good look at it until the companion book, Thomas and the Evil Diesel. I'm not sure if these books are considered canon within the Railway series. They were published at the request of the producers for Thomas and Friends, but they were written by the Audreys. If anyone can provide evidence on this, let me know in the comments. It's safe to assume the track once beside Thomas has been ripped up and replaced by road. Fencing has been installed separating the rails from the tarmac, which proved to be another wise business decision as Diesel would push the trucks through the buffers and tumble onto the streets. Thankfully, no damage was done to the sheds, but there isn't much merit to this book, aside from Diesel's supposed redemption arc. It is amazing to see the home of Thomas the Tank Engine evolve over the years. Almost like this Sodor landmark went through its own character journey, literal character development, as they continue to expand from a single berth to 3 berths, plus 2 carriage sheds for coaches and rail cars. It's not like an overhaul, more like extra features added with every change, illustrating a stage of its history with every new addition added to the town of Ffarquhar. Now, how did the TV show handle? The sheds from Ffarquhar deviates quite a bit in the TV adaptation. In season 1, Thomas, Toby and Percy all stayed in Tidmouth sheds. It wasn't until season 2 they were moved to Ffarquhar sheds, which for some reason was renamed to Tidmouth yard sheds. I understand the limited space with the set designs, except on this particular set where the sheds have been placed, nowhere do they depict the iconic Tidmouth sheds. For all we know, they could be miles away from each other. Also, if they're meant to be in close proximity to each other, what is the point of moving any of their engines? I'm glad they kept the original design intact. 2 of the berths are a lighter color than the one on the right, which is a darker orange, but in context of the TV show, it doesn't make much sense. With the 3 residents moving in all at once, there is no progress into its origin. It's as if we skipped an entire character journey. What's funny about the limitations with the sets, we can clearly see the station master's house behind the sheds. Meaning, when Thomas comes to breakfast, he rolls off, performs a U-turn, and comes back the other way and smashes right through the house! The odds of this happening are so astronomically unlikely, it is hilarious. One detail the set designers got right was placing a church on the west side of the sheds in the background. There's never any attention drawn to it, but it can be seen in the books, making its placement accurate to the source material. This show used to be in such good hands. It would appear these sheds were incompatible under the new direction the show had taken. Flash forward to season 3, they had all but been abandoned. Which cleverly worked to the show's advantage. In season 3 episode 21, Douglas helped Oliver the Great Western Engine to escape the scrapyard. Worried Oliver shouldn't be on Sodor, their crew decided to hide Oliver in the very sheds that had been abandoned. A fruitless attempt as the Fat Controller still found out, but I digress. This is quite an ingenious way of repurposing old props so they would not go to waste. It's a way of continuing their story that feels natural under the direction the show has chosen. We are not sure if they are the same sheds in the original story that became Oliver's hiding place, but considering they were occupied at this time, I highly doubt it. What was not clever was their adaptation of the carriage sheds. Instead of 2 berths, it is a single berth, an open shed with no sidewalls that is located in Hackenbeck, a town that has only ever appeared in seasons 3 and 4. It's also unclear if Daisy became a member of Thomas's branch line. I already covered the controversy around Daisy in a previous video, and it's reasonable to assume this likely contributed to the lackluster portrayal of these sheds, as Daisy's placement in the show was hazy around this time. I'm glad they even bothered giving Daisy her own shed, but as they were strongly tied to her character, without Daisy, there was no use for them. Alright, so it turns out the carriage shed is that giant roof that housed Henrietta and Thomas's coaches in Daisy's debut episode. It's still an open shed, which is not how it was designed in the Railway series, but at least it's accurate in both purpose and location. Which begs the question, if this can be placed along the Ffarqhuar branch line, why couldn't the original sheds? I don't know, I cannot tell you what the model crew was thinking. Either way, hopefully I corrected myself and avoided a barrage of comments addressing me on this little known fact I almost overlooked. We're good? Of course we're good. It wouldn't be until another 2 seasons until we would see the main sheds again, but as you can see, they've been separated. I don't know if Sodor had any vehicles capable of moving entire buildings, but the brick shed became Oliver's berth, which is lovely continuity addressing the events of Escape. The other 2 berths were relocated to Boulder quarry, where they were placed next to the newly constructed sheds for the little engines, allowing narrow gauge and standard gauge engines to have more crossover episodes. And yes, this is the same set where Rusty told Duncan about the ghost engine. Again, with the origin of Ffarquhar sheds modeled in the TV adaptation, their purpose and usage is lessened. But at least the TV crew did not forget about them, and found a new way to incorporate them into their own stories. The new quarry received its name for it was home to a mysterious boulder nearby. It lived peacefully high in the mountains until the quarry workers awoke it from its slumber. Angered by the disturbance, it wreaked havoc for the little engines, terrorizing the lot of them, threatening to pulverize anything in its path, including the sheds. The scale of destruction this aggressive entity left in its wake was enough for the Fat Controller to reconsider his plans, and closed the quarry while it was still in its infancy. Season 5 is one of the most experimental seasons. It was the first season where none of the episodes were based on the books, and they pulled it off so well some consider this season to be the best of the whole show. One criticism it has received, for as explosive as the episodes are, there is very little continuity in this season that is carried over to future seasons. However, thanks to this discovery, Rusty and the Boulder cannot be considered filler. Nothing in the episode is referenced again, and none of the new characters return. But now we know what happened to Thomas's, Percy's, and Toby's new home. If we shuffle the events around, we have an in-universe canonical reason why these three returned to the original Tidmouth sheds. Probably unintentional, but at least we can make a connection, even if the setup was sloppy. But how would Oliver fit into this new proposed canon? Considering how quickly the Ffarquhar found out about Oliver's presence, it's possible the sheds were scheduled to be transferred to Boulder quarry the same day the Great Western Engine had escaped. Alright gentlemen, we're about to move these silly sheds to the new quarry. It's going to be a busy day for all of us, but first we ought to conduct a health and safety inspection, make sure the structural integrity is in good shape for the journey, and no disease-riddled vermins have wandered into these historic buildings.
Hello, sir.
Holy Moses, that's a giant rat! The last major event for the loathsome shed was in the following season. It was relocated for the last time to its original home, Ffarquhar. And who got to become its resident? Mavis. A wholesome ending to what was a dark turn in this little shed's life cycle. Once strayed away from the source material, now they have returned to accuracy. That's the weird dichotomy with Britt Allcroft's adaptation of Audrey's work. For everything that was left out, something new was added in. Henry never got to perform his super rescue, but he was shown to be a lover of nature. Gordon never retired from the Express, but he would receive a rival who would attempt to outclass him. And Ffarquhar Sheds may not have had an origin, but it did have an ending. A banger of an ending. Ultimately, whatever your preference is to which was the best depiction of Thomas's home, these sheds are just one of many reasons folks continuously return to Sodor and study its rich, enthralling history. And that is going to be the end of the video. Thank you once again for watching and supporting this channel. If you'd like to support it further, I got a Patreon and I will be posting clips there as I work on my 80th anniversary video for the channel. It's going to be an exciting time when May rolls around, and I wonder what everyone else will have planned. What are your own plans if you are willing to share? Please like, share, comment on this video if you found it informative, and let me know if you like my slow approach to videos, or if you prefer my normally paced way of speaking. Until next time, take care, mates.